Well, Donna met a police officer. She tried to get around police officers as friends because she was looking for help and for support and for safety.
She doesn't have money. She's spending a lot of time on the streets, and also she's being groomed into sex working.
She ran away at 17. She's on her own. I just cannot imagine.
Hello, and welcome to Best Case, Worst Case. This is Jim Clemente, retired FBI profiler, former New York City prosecutor, and writer-producer of CBS's Criminal Minds. And with me today is...
Hi, everybody. It's Francey Hakes, former state and federal prosecutor. Jim, we have a brand new guest. It's so exciting when we have a brand new guest. Not to say there's anything wrong with having a returning guest. We love our returning friends and colleagues that come on the podcast, but we have a brand new guest today.
Scare away.
That I don't scare away. And her name is?
Anita Defrancesco.
And Anita, who are you?
Well, okay. I am, firstly, I am a woman. No.
Good.
Well, here's the thing. My background is I'm a psychotherapist and a love and relationship coach. So I practice teaching couples how to savor their love, to bring back the passion in their relationships, sacred sexuality. A lot of that involves the yoga, tantric kind of a world. So I studied and I received all my certifications and my master's degree in Los Angeles. But I also am a two-time author, and I wrote a book called Live Free, which is more of a self-help book and about my journey into my life and how I transformed through the teachings of what I'm teaching people. And my other book is the true crime book. The first true crime book I wrote, the Donna Gentilly story, which is my first cousin. And that was a personal story is why I wrote it. So I like true crime. I'd love to write.
Well, Anita, before we get into the true crime part, which of course is why we're having you on the podcast, I'm just wondering, I have a feeling there are a lot of our listeners out there, maybe even thousands of them, I don't know, who when you said relationship coach might have immediately said, well, thank God, Francey and Jim need a relationship coach. But Jim and I are platonic friends. So do you do that kind of relationship coaching, or is it just for people who are different kinds of friends?
Well, I really coach everyone, coach and counsel, and use my psychotherapy techniques. But I use a lot of the Tantra and yogic. It's a yogic of the senses and teaching people how to evolve to the higher power and learn communication and how to really develop more love versus hate within the human condition.
Wow.
So, yes. And that is the big thing.
That would be a challenge with Francey, though.
Sure. Jim, you say that to make fun of me, but I was actually going to say, I think I need that. I read the headlines every day and I've got a lot of hate in my heart. So Anita, I might need you.
Yes. Well, what I teach people is how to remove that hate and open the heart and celebrate the heart and celebrate love and to make love to life. And once you start to do that, you start to find love if you're single and isolated. And people wonder why they can't meet someone. And why is it taking so long? Because they're shut down and they're frozen and there's armor in their eyes. And when the armor is there, you're not connecting. The first connection you make to another human is through the eyes. And then it goes right down into the chakras of the belly.
Is it also possible that there are weapons in the eyes? In other words, not just protective mechanisms, but actually that kind of
offensive weapons in the eyes. Yes. I think Jim might be talking about me, and he's not talking about my eyelashes, people.
If the shoe fits, if the eyelashes fit, whatever.
Well, anyway, Anita, let's actually talk about what you're here about instead of my eyelashes and Jim's anger problem. Okay, So Anita, you said you wrote a true crime book. Jim has put it up on the screen for all of our Patreon subscribers. You guys can see it. And for anyone who doesn't subscribe, if you want to see, I don't know, these books that when we bring on authors, we're maybe going to have one next week also, or my eyelashes, subscribe to our Patreon channel. But in the meantime.
So the book that you wrote, Anita, and that you talked to me about when we met at CrimeCon is the Donna Gentilly story.
Correct.
And it is, it's the case that we're going to be talking about today. So the first thing I'd like to ask is, when did this happen? When did the critical events in this story occur?
It was 1985 in San Diego. Her short 5 years there. She was there 5 years.
Okay. And Donna Gentilly is your cousin, right?
My first cousin.
Okay. And
can you talk about her a little bit?
Yeah, that's what we'd like to cover victimology first. So just tell us about her, Donna Gentilly, and who she was, what she was into, what her life and dreams were, and your relationship with her. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the last time I saw Donna, I was in my 20s, and I was preparing to move to Los Angeles, but she beat me and moved to San Diego first. She was about 8 years younger than myself. Her father, and my mother were brother and sister. And Donna's father had died, Lou Gentilly Sr., and Donna went with the mother and the stepdad, and my aunt married, I think he was a sheriff. I'm not quite sure. But the brother, Donna's brother, they were both under 18. So when the father died, my mother took over legal guardianship of the brother. And he came to live with us in our South Philadelphia home. And Donna stayed with her mom and her stepdad. And allegedly there was some, alleged molestation that went on with the stepdad and her, is what led her to be the innocent runaway. And in the book, I mentioned that, and I say alleged because everything is alleged. And she ended up running away. My aunt and her stepdad put her in a delinquent home for children.
At what age did she run away?
She was she went into the delinquent home at 17. She was 17 when she arrived in San Diego, and she was murdered at 22.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so can we talk a little bit about her, how you know her? For example, in my family, there are, I think, 25 of us first cousins. And I grew up going annually to family, Hakes family reunions. And they were all over the country. And then cousins had kids, and then they had kids. And I just, tons and tons of generations. And we all laughed and talked about stories. And so what was your growing up experience like with your cousin?
What I do remember is that my mother was very close to her brother, Uncle Lou, and we would visit their home, and Donna and her brother and myself and my other siblings, we would play in the yard in the city life. We would, and I always thought she was so cute. I would hug her because she was about 7 years or 8 years younger than me. And so I was kind of like, I felt like the adult cousin to her. And we would just play, and it was just beautiful because I so much admired my cousin. And I wanted to be her friend when we got older. And we did know each other up until I was about 25, because I believe that maybe if she was 8 years younger is when she was already in California. And but we had a beautiful relationship growing up of love and family. And her mom was a nurse, and my uncle was a chef, worked in a restaurant back then, and they were making ends meet, raising the children. And my mom was so fond of her brother that we would visit all the time and play with them. That's my memories of Donna.
That's awesome. That's great to know. And when Donna decided to go to San Diego, did she run away from a group home or a facility, or what happened?
The Tabor home in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, is where my aunt and her stepfather put her because she was staying out all night, staying out overnight, getting into the wrong crowds, drugs, drinking, and she was maybe 16 or 15. And so they thought it would be best to put her in there to give her a chance at a more stable life. But the reality is she had a stable life with her stepfather and the mother, but the stepfather allegedly went off the grid. So how stable is that? Is why she would stay out all night with her girlfriends. She didn't want to go home to that.
Right.
And they thought it was, drugs, this, that, and the like. But they were smart enough to put her in that home, in the Tabor home, which is a wonderful home here in Bucks County for all types of mental illness. And back then, they were just starting to break through for children that were there to be adopted. And maybe that's why Donna ran away. Maybe she didn't want to be adopted because it was just the beginning of them starting that process of the children they had there to put them up for adoption. And Donna and a girlfriend, hitched a bus. They had a few dollars in their pocket and she went to San Diego.
And she would have been about 17 when this happened?
Yeah, 17. So she stayed at the Tabor home for about a year and we couldn't visit her. Her brother was living with us, my mother, who was the legal guardian of the brother. So all the phone calls, everything came into the home that I grew up in because her brother and her were so connected. They had such a bond. It was a bond that I was envious of because with my three siblings, we didn't have quite the bond, but they seemed to have a very close bond. They were both into horses. He was grooming horses at the Ben Salem racetrack. She grew up with horses. She had a horse in San Diego, is why she never wanted to leave there because she couldn't leave that spirit animal behind that was so connected to her for the life that she ended up in. And horses, they have this way of transforming you to become a better person. It is a better pet than a dog. And so
that's why it's used in a lot of therapy for children.
Equine therapy.
Horses.
Yes. Equine therapy.
Do you know it also helps you build your core, and people actually think better while they're riding on a horse because it engages all these muscles in your body that makes you focus better. I mean, I've heard amazing stories, but before we even get into further, I just want to say most of our listeners will probably recognize Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and Ben Salem, Pennsylvania as the home of our good friend and often guest, Jim Fitzgerald.
Right. And I think I may mention him in the book. I'm not even sure, but I've been seeing his name around lately here, or maybe at the convention. I don't know. But so she had this love for horses and her brother and her were very bonded. So she would always, and from the Tabor home, we weren't allowed to visit her or no one was allowed to speak to her. I don't think they had telephones then or whatever, smartphones weren't out in the 80s. And it was kind of like a darkness there. So we really don't know what happened in that home. And anything.
But she left, right? She left.
Well, her and a girlfriend ran. They escaped.
Right. And so when did you learn that she was actually in San Diego, and how did you learn that?
Well, I knew it right away because as soon as she went to San Diego on the bus, she called my home with my mother was the legal guardian of her brother. And the only reason the brother did not want to live with the stepfather and the mother is because of what the stepfather did to the sister, Donna. And he didn't want to be a part of that environment. And he was under 18. So my mother and her sisters came together and my mother said, I'll take him. Wow. And we sent him off. He went to college and everything. He became a really good person out there in the world, a great job. But the whole time, once she landed in San Diego, she made the phone call to us and she says, I'm here. And then it was a very dark, very, very painful life. She was in the streets and she didn't have anywhere to go. And at that time, curfew was 16 or 17. And if you were on the streets, you were arrested. Anybody, any teenager. And really? it was very strict in San Diego back then. And so Donna would talk to us and on the phone, and all she did and sent all these letters, which I have every one of them. Only one I put in the book, but it was
you
like
kept all her letters.
Oh, I have more, so I'll have to write another book and put them in. I only put one in there, but she would call her brother, and he didn't know what to do. He was a few years older than her. I mean, let's face it, this is a woman's issues. And the women of the world weren't there. The sisters of the world weren't there then in the 80s. So you call your brother, he doesn't know what to do. Your boys are trying to rape you. People are trying to make you a prostitute and groom you. You have no money. You don't know what to do. What do? You're in the streets. You're a girl. Figure it out. Right? So that's where she ended up. And she was not a drug girl. She experimented like anyone else, but certainly did not have addictions or alcoholism at all. She did not have that, which most people in her shoes would tend to lean in that journey because it takes away the pain. But Donna was resilient. Donna had a voice.
What year was Donna born, Anita?
She was born, let me look in the book here.
Sorry.
I know it's her birthday's coming. Actually, it might be. She was born August 22nd, 1962.
Wow.
Just a few years older than me.
Yeah.
And then June 23rd, 85. Yeah.
Younger than me.
So she was a resilient girl. She had a voice. She was very well liked. She could have been very successful. She had aspirations to become a police officer, a person of FBI. That was her aspirations. Now, we had a lot of policemen in the family on the Gentilly side, but her stepdad, I do believe he was a big sheriff in Philly. I don't know. I'm not going to say his name, but anyway, my aunt stayed with him all these years. And as it went, a mother never believes her daughter when those kind of things happen, especially in the greater Philadelphia area in the 80s. It wasn't a time of having a voice.
Was she religious, the mother?
We were all Catholic. Donna's mother was, we're Italian. Her mother was of German-Irish descent, and our side was the Italian side. And we're all Catholic, yes. So, but
that can factor into the equation.
Yes. So it was all Catholic. But the thing was with Donna is that when she escaped, she had that strength, that resiliency. And I know it must definitely come from my mother's side of the family, because I have that kind of strength that I can pull through anything. I can move mountains. And I don't know where it comes from. And I saw my mother do that with her divorce and her life. And remember, we're going back to the 80s when women didn't really have the support that we have today.
Do you know, I was writing another project and I found out that it wasn't until the 1960s that women were allowed to have their own bank accounts in 1973 before a woman could have her own credit card. Everything before that had to be in her father or her husband's name. Period.
Interesting. Wow.
And my husband wonders why we have a bank account and I have a bank account. That's why.
Yeah.
Because I can.
Because Francey can.
That's
so
right.
To make it that, she called us, and every day she was on the telephone with her brother. And of course, I was there, and we would always be giving him the support. Let's try to bring her back. We even tried to figure what family relative would have the room. And we were going to go out there and get her. We didn't like that she was living. Donna had a family. She had a big family. And a lot of the runaways and a lot of the girls, she ended up in prostitution. She was groomed. But a lot of women like that, or girls, they don't have families.
So, Anita, Donna obviously was in a rough spot when she's without a home there in San Diego. She doesn't have money. She's spending a lot of time on the streets. And I mean, generally, like you said, there was a curfew, and also she's being groomed into sex working, and all those things probably end her up getting arrested, right?
Yes.
So can you tell us about that, and tell us about, how you heard about these things? How are you getting updates on this?
Well, initially it was coming right into the home there, because every day she spoke with her brother. And of course, at the dinner table, this was the conversation about the sister. And she did tell us that she had a couple of arrests, but she had this one arrest that, in the beginning, when you get arrested for the sex work, aka prostitution, sex work, you get demoted in the charges. And you're not initially. And it was not a felony at that time. The sex work today, it is a felony. But the first charge is like they lessen the charge or they demote the charge, and she was able to be out, in a night or a couple of nights. So she did have a few night arrests in the beginning. And then that's where the story starts, in the very beginning, when she...
And so what did you find out about? What is the story that starts at that point?
Well, Donna met a police officer. Now, Donna was, to say, she was a very friendly, personable person, and she had a very good, articulate way of speaking. She didn't sound like a street girl. She didn't even have a Philadelphia, Brooklyn type accent that we have here. She just had a very nice way of speaking, and people were attracted to her. She was in a, from what I gather from the information that I have and the people that I've interviewed, she tried to get around police officers as friends because she was looking for help and for support and for safety, for safety. And now a prostitute and a sex worker stays completely away from law because they know they're going to get arrested just for the fact of what they do. But Donna was, like I said, resilient, strong. She had confidence. She met with one officer and she told him all about her life. He did not know who she was, that she had been arrested for the sex work, but he took her on what they call a civil ride-along, where you take civilians who are interested in learning about working in law enforcement. And Donna, she was asked him, can you take me? And so there were some papers that had to be filled out on his part. And she filled out all these papers. And then when the ride-along was over and the officer, who was the main officer involved in this whole story, gets called out that, don't you know that she's a prostitute and you took this girl on a ride-along and you're not supposed to be with this type of person? In other words, you can't take those kind of people out on ride-alongs, even if they do have aspirations or ambitions, just because, of what they did. And she had already had a record at the precinct. So Donna, to say the least, she became a security guard, worked as a security guard because she was 17. And you had to be, I think, 17 or 18 at that time to get any type of employment in those days.
Right.
It wasn't like you can get a job. You had to be 17. And she worked as a security guard. She sent us home a picture. She had this little badge, like a police badge.
Right. She was proud of it, huh?
Yes. And she was like, I'm going to be a cop one day. I'm going to work my way up. So security guard, you have to be personable. You can't be on drugs. You have to greet people at a hotel or wherever it was. And she did that off and on for the 5 years that she was there. She had a little job.
Okay. And who was the police officer?
Well, the police officer was Larry. He was the police officer that was involved in taking her on the ride along. And he was the one that eventually was fired. 5 years later, the story has other layers to it.
Right.
But they were initially friends in the beginning. Now, to say if they were client, date kind of friends, I'm going to say yes. But Donna wasn't just, remember her line of work. You have to keep that. And a man, a policeman is no different than any other man. So that's why they called him out on taking her for a ride along. But he said he didn't know that's who she was, that she was an arrested record prostitute.
How old was this police officer, Larry?
I think he was, he might have been about 10 years on her.
Okay, so she was 17 and he was about 27.
Something of that, yeah.
And was he a full-fledged police officer at this time, or?
Well, he had just finished the academy because I had done some interviews with him and all on things I needed to learn to write this book. And I don't know, I read between the lines with all the people I interviewed, but he had just finished the academy and was on his first year over there at the San Diego Police Department as a regular full-fledged policeman.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so, he seems to be, have reached out to her and tried to be nice to her. And then he kind of gets in trouble for it.
Right. They called him out. And I don't think that, maybe he wasn't like, the most popular policeman on the force. I mean, you know how it is. Job politics, some people you like, some you don't. That happens everywhere. But I think they really gave him hell about it, that he did this. And they put what they call a note I say like a demotion in his file. So he wasn't. They really did a lot of things. They took him off, like, what do they call that? Police, riding around kind of work. They put him on in-house duty or something.
Okay, like on a desk.
Yes, or something of that nature for a while. And what they did was they put a note. So that note is like a little demotion, in school, like a demerit or something, that you're on, you have a 1 point against you. And they did this. And I even actually have the note in the book. I think he gave me a copy of it and I put it in the book. And that was the beginning of his troubles.
Okay.
It was the beginning of Donna's troubles.
Anita, thank you so much for joining us. And obviously, we're just scratching the surface of the Donna Gentilly story. And we're really interested in finding out more about Donna and what she went through, and also about your investigation into what happened to Donna Gentilly. So we're really looking forward to you coming back next week and filling in our listeners and subscribers about the Donna Gentilly story. Until next time, everybody, thank you for listening to Best Case, Worst Case. Signing off. Best Case, Worst Case is an XG production, produced by Francey Hakes, Josh Murphy, and Jim Clemente at Empire Studios, LA. Engineered and edited by Matt Gergel. Music composed and performed by Simba Sumba and hosted by Wondery.
You can listen to Best Case, Worst Case on your favorite listening app. We are on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you want to do something about child sexual abuse, Darkness to Light can help. Did you know that more than 90% of the time children are sexually abused by someone they know?
Jim, this isn't about stranger danger. It's about learning the true risks. Darkness to Light's training can help prevent, recognize, and react to child sexual abuse in your community.
When you make the decision to get involved, kids can be protected. It starts with you.
Visit www.d2l.org to take the training and learn more.
That's D2L.org.